Committee of 100 tries to provide information to the community prior to decisions being made. When we first discussed this program in the program committee, I must tell you that the responses we got back from the county was, it's premature. You shouldn't be talking about this, not this year. Well, interestingly, this last week, I noted that on the county board's agenda this Saturday is the East Falls Church plan. So I don't think it was too early. And I thank our program committee and Ed Nolan especially, who led the program for this evening, to put together our program in advance of that county board meeting on Saturday. The county board is already expecting to hear a lot of discussions about their budget that they're going to be adopting on Saturday and the East Falls Church initiative. Our program may provide you with the incentive or the information you need to actually participate in that civic endeavor. We're excited tonight to have 3 speakers on this topic, 2 of whom have been on the task force of the East Falls Church Development Project. I don't remember if that's the exact name. And one who's going to talk to us about housing, specifically as it's going to be impacted by the East Falls Church proposed development. Some of you may know that this development is going to be coinciding with the expansion of the Silver Line, which will be heading out to Dulles. So we already are on the cusp, as we have been often in Arlington, with the benefits of being in the center of mass transit and other opportunities for transportation. But we know that there are those who, favoring the additional development, will say that this is going to be in line with that history, that this is the same as the smart growth that we've done in the RB corridor. And we're going to have all the same benefits. But we also have those who know that maybe this is a little unique, that East Falls Church is not a Rosenballston area. And so we're going to have that discussion tonight and hear a little bit more about what the project is going to endeavor. Toward that end, we have 3 people already introduced briefly as our guests this evening. Among our guests this evening, we have Mike Nardolilli, Ed Parker, and Alice Hogan. Alan Parker, sorry. I read it wrong. Alan Parker, I might have to start using those glasses. This is a sad thing. Alan Parker and Alice Hogan. Mr. Nardolilli is going to start first, and Mr. Mike Nardolilli is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the Georgetown University who received his law degree from William & Mary. He's held numerous civic positions, including being the chairman of the East Falls Church Planning Task Force, chairman of the Arlington County Transportation Commission, president of the East Falls Church Civic Association. He's also served as the president of the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust, a regional accredited land trust based in Annandale since July of 2005. Prior to his elevation as president, Mr. Nardolilli served as vice president and general counsel of NVCT, a position he held since joining that organization in 1999. He and his wife have 3 children. We're fortunate to have one of his sons with us tonight, but we'll start with Mike Nardolilli.
Thank you very much. So the topic for this evening is East Falls Church Area Plan, too much, too little, or just right. And so I guess that makes me Goldilocks, because I'm going to be arguing that it's just right. But before we can talk about what East Falls Church will be, we need to know what it was. So what was East Falls Church? It was part of the city of Falls Church, believe it or not, until 1936, when it was acceded into Arlington County. There was a trolley station surrounded by neighborhood-oriented retail and single-family homes. This is how it was described by one writer. East Falls Church had a central business district surrounded by a residential area that sported some graceful Victorian-style era dwellings, as well as newer homes. Residents could commute to work downtown from train and trolley stations within walking distance of their front doors. They needed to go no more than a few blocks for groceries, prescriptions, clothing, movies, and hot meals, not to mention the services of all the establishments and professions common to any town. Sounds like a nice place to live, doesn't it? This is a picture of it. This is the central business district. This is the trolley station. This is now the W&OD Trail. This is Lee Highway. And this area here is the central business district. Here's another photograph. of the Central Business District. Looks a lot like Westover, doesn't it? You have all of these stores along here and shops. Well, what happened to it? That's what happened to it. I-66 came in, and all of that area that you saw in the picture was right in the right-of-way, and that's gone. And so so the coming of I-66 not only destroyed that Central Business District, it split our neighborhood into two. This is actually both parts of our neighborhood now, separated by a trench. And in the place of all those nice shops was 5 acres of surface parking. So after all this came to pass, the community became aware of the fact that there was a rumor that Metro and VDOT were considering a large parking garage on the surface parking lot at East Falls Church. This actually is a picture of the Vienna parking structure, 6 stories, and that's not what the neighborhood wanted. So in November of 2000, the Arlington East Falls Church Civic Association, that is quite a mouthful, we actually had efforts to try to change the name, but we kept the name, formed the Metro Study Committee in November of 2000. In April of 2002, the East Falls Church Station Access Study was released. It showed that 80% of the East Falls Church park and ride lot usage came from outside of Arlington. And it also examined the impact of a large parking garage if it was built on the site. The Arlington East Falls Church Civic Association paid Virginia Tech to develop a plan. And that plan called for, and that's right, 900,000 square feet of development on the 2 lots. So we drafted a survey and with detailed explanation materials concerning the developments on the lots. We hand-delivered the survey to each member of the household. We received 113 responses, and they were tabulated by a committee. 87% favored developing a plan before Metro, and the developers came forward with a plan. And the land use choices garnering more than 50%, neighborhood-oriented retail of 74%, restaurants 62%, short-term parking 57%, residential 53%, and open space 51%. Only 29% favored keeping the commuter parking. We asked the questions, what should the development density on the Metro lots be? Weighted mean of responses was 2.0 FAR, which on those sites works out to 464,000 square feet of development. And then what should be the height of development on the Metro lots? The weighted mean of responses, 6 stories, and 54% favored setting aside percentage for affordable housing. 90% favored making improvements to the streets around the Metro lots to make the area more pedestrian friendly. 83% favored a pedestrian bicycle bridge over I-66, and 65% favored constructing large open space plaza. This last one was, we priced it out, and it was over $65 million, so that was not very feasible. So the Civic Association asked the county to develop a plan. The county board responded by appointing a task force in June of 2007 with a variety of stakeholders, both in and outside of the Civic Association. We conducted 32 public meetings, held 3 well-attended public hearings, and made 12 community presentations, and finally developed a plan that was adopted. It was called the Task Force Plan, and it was adopted 14-4, or 78%, which is a very good indication of consensus. That was accepted by the county board in July of 2010, and that was revised by the staff and released in January of 2011 after another round of community open houses and meetings. So let's look at the plan a little bit. This is the study area. This is the Metros here. This is I-66. This is Lee Highway here and Washington Boulevard. And so this is the radius. This is a quarter-mile radius, and this is a half-mile radius from there. As you see, there's a lot of single-family homes that are within a half-mile radius. And so if you were just going to apply a Rosalind Bolson sort of analysis of just doing a bullseye development, all of those homes would be taken out. And so that's not something that the neighborhood was in favor of. We looked at certain sites, though, that could use more density. And so these are the sites here. There's site A here was the oil company. This is a 3-acre oil depot that's in our neighborhood. Site B, a used car lot. Site D, which was a BB&T bank site. Site F, SunTrust, Verizon site here. Exxon station here. A small parcel here. And then this is the M1 site, which is the Metro lot, a park and ride lot. The M2, which is the Kiss and Ride lot. Site C was a restaurant, a hotel site. So we looked at these sites, but not the single-family homes. And so the idea was to try to preserve the single-family homes, but look at those other sites as candidates for more density. The concept plan, this would be a neighborhood transition area. This was going to be a gateway area, and finally here a transit mixed use right around the metro stop itself. One of the exciting things that came out of the task force was the concept of a west entrance to the East Falls Church Station, which would then link up the two halves of the neighborhood that were cut by I-66, so people from this side could walk right down here into the metro, and there are different design plans for that, but the concept is in the plan as connecting these two halves of the neighborhood. Height plan, this has gotten a lot of press, of course, but I want to show you just what these heights are. These are 4-story buildings here that that are proposed in the plan, up to 5 stories here, up to 6 stories here. Right along the border of Falls Church, where it matches the development plan on the other side, is called for an 8-story building. Over here, along the M1 site along Washington Boulevard, is proposed 3-story building going up to 6 stories for the remainder of the site, and then a 9-story building right along cheek by jowl of I-66. So you can see that this is not Ballston. This is not even Shirlington. When I was in the Busboys and Poets the other day, I looked up and I counted 12 stories. When I was in Clarendon, I looked up and I counted 12 stories at the corner of Garfield Street. The maximum here is 1 building of 9 stories, 1 building of 8 stories, and the rest 6 stories or below. Across the street here, there's a building off of Yorktown Boulevard that's 6 stories high. You know, so almost all of this is 6 stories or below. So it's not a very massive or dense development. It is not Ballston. It's not Shirlington. Potential land uses, we talked about having this area being more neighborhood use, and so it's converting commercial property into residential property along that part of the development. Over here, you have mixed use as the gateway and mixed use open space here at the M1 site, and townhouse, townhouse, townhouse. So you can see that this is very, very low scale development and density. I also want to point out that the plan has a number of street improvements along Lee Highway, along Washington Boulevard, along all of the major arterial streets. There would be on-street bike lanes, new lane configuration, intersection enhancements, tree planting areas, and then a studying of the widening of the Lee Highway Bridge so that people can walk back and forth. I was nearly killed twice walking across that bridge. The study of the old W&OD trail to make it align better. So all of those transportation improvements, coupled with the fact that this is very, very little development, the transportation analysis that was done showed that there's the traffic generating here is very, very small, and that the traffic study concluded that the improvements will accommodate the proposed development. And there are a couple of major traffic generators that are going to be eliminated. One is the commuter parking at the park and ride lot site. That's 422 spaces for commuter parking will be eliminated. And then over here at the Exxon Mobil site, which is again another major generator of traffic, will be then for a residential usage. So anyway, let's focus on the Metro Lots development because that's gotten a lot of press. On the Metro lot, the plan proposes a public plaza of at least 30,000 square feet, surrounded by restaurants and neighborhood-oriented retail. And then there would be a provision for between 100 and 200 spaces for shared use parking, which would be available to Metro users for short-term parking and use on evenings and weekends. And it calls for 450,000 to 600,000 square feet of development. The height limit of 3 stories, I mentioned before, along the streets, stepping back to 6 stories for most of the site, and narrow 9-story height limit along I-66. And I mentioned all those street improvements. And then achieve a minimum of 30 to 45 units of on-site affordable housing for the park and ride lot site. Again, keeping with the neighborhood interest. These are some pictures of what the development would look like. This is Washington Boulevard at Sycamore Street, looking at the development across the street. This is another view along Washington Boulevard near the current entrance to the park and ride lot site. And this is looking at the plaza area, looking east. So you can see that it is not these towering buildings. It's a very human scale, especially surrounded by neighborhood-oriented retail. So the plan summary is that we put all the existing single-family homes off limits to development, and the planned development on the Metro lot sites follows the results of the survey that was done, with the exception of the 9-story building along I-66. But we felt that it was balanced by the fact that it would only be 3 stories along Washington Boulevard and Sycamore Street. So you take those extra 3 stories and you put them way in the back. And then we have these numerous transportation and pedestrian improvements. So leaving you with the question, what will the East Falls Church be? In 2 years, you'll be able to hop on a train at East Falls Church and be in 5 minutes at Tyson's Corner, which is the 12th largest employment center in the United States. So change is coming to East Falls Church. We need a plan to implement that change, and I believe this is the Goldilocks plan. Thank you very much.
I'm very glad that the Committee of 100 has taken an interest in this issue, and I'm glad to have this chance to give you my perspective. As you know, the County Board is going to take action probably on Saturday, maybe on Saturday. I think the community supports the idea of a western entrance to the metro station to help connect it with the corridor of businesses and new apartment buildings across I-66 to the west. We like it that the plan acknowledges that I-66 access ramps create problems in the community, and we support the idea of trying to get some improvement in that situation. And we like the fact that it recognizes the need to improve conditions for pedestrians around the metro station and throughout the area, and that it envisages a significant public gathering space near the metro station. The community's concerns are mainly focused on the area north of the metro station, which is today the Metrobus loading zone and the commuter parking lot. We think there's really not enough room on the parking lot to successfully accomplish the transit-oriented development that the county envisages. We think that overbuilding on that space would create congestion and undermine the character of East Falls Church. I'd like to ask you to keep in mind that East Falls Church, like much of Arlington, is very suburban. West of I-66, along Lee Highway, there's the short corridor, Mike alluded to it, of shops and businesses, and the new Wesley and Crescent apartment buildings that we've already mentioned. That area is the remnant of the commercial center of East Falls Church that grew up around the railway station and no longer exists. On the east side of I-66, except for the metro station, metro site itself, the area is overwhelmingly low density, low rise, mostly single family houses. There are 2 low rise multifamily buildings on Washington Boulevard near the I-66 westbound ramp. The BB&T Bank is at the Lee Highway corner, and the SunTrust Bank, which you saw on Mike's graphic, is on Lee Highway. The whole triangular block facing the metro lot is occupied by townhouses, a low-rise telephone company building, and the Exxon station at the I-66 corner. Beyond Sycamore Street to the east and Lee Highway to the north, single-family detached houses stretch literally for miles. The people who live there are very attached to the suburban character of their neighborhood. Many say that's why they choose to live there. They're eager to protect what they regard as the character of their community. And many fear the plan would destroy that character. In particular, they think construction of a 9-story building or buildings and 600,000 square feet of floor area on the Metro parking site would be a serious mistake. Last summer, a petition with more than 200 signatures objecting to 9 stories was presented to the county board. Community members have spoken up to the county board at every recent opportunity without any evident effect. How did the plan arrive at 9 stories? Early in the work of the task force, county staff produced massing studies showing roughly how buildings could be placed on the Metro parking site. Through several iterations, some of us asked to see smaller buildings in various positions. Each time the staff brought a new drawing, the buildings that we asked be smaller were smaller, but other buildings had grown bigger. Gradually, it emerged that the staff was not willing to produce drawings showing less than 450,000 square feet of total building on the site. They said 450,000 square feet was the minimum necessary for the economic viability of any project to develop the site. And we were given a presentation showing why 450,000 square feet is necessary. You can see the presentation on page 27 of the plan. It says a development of at least 450,000 square feet is needed to generate revenue and ridership at the existing levels and therefore satisfy typical metro requirements for redevelopment of the parking lot. In other words, they said, we needed to put 450,000 square feet of buildings on the parking lot to make it as economically viable as it is right now. The task force proceeded for a number of months thinking that 450,000 square feet and 6 stories was probably the consensus figure for development on the Metro lot. Some of us were not happy, but thought it was the best outcome we were going to be able to obtain. Then, at our second to last meeting, there was a new proposal. The limit on development would be increased to 600,000 square feet and the building height limit to 9 stories in order to give the county room to negotiate compelling community benefits with a potential developer. There was no discussion of design implications, no discussion of community views, no discussion of impact on traffic, impact on schools, impact on parking. There was no discussion of what compelling community benefits might be, only that it was desirable to provide for 33% more density than we had been discussing for 2 years to trade for benefits from developers. I can find nothing in the plan that describes exactly what uses this level of development would be put. We can only try to guess. If 80% of 450,000 square feet were housing units, there would be about 277 units. If the additional 150,000 square feet were all housing, that might be 115 more. It's not a very big site. It's 5.7 acres in all, and the topography is difficult. It rises fairly steeply from Sycamore Street up toward the point of the triangle formed by Washington Boulevard and I-66. It calls for imaginative and sensitive design. One other point, you may already know that VDOT owns 2/3 of the site, and they object to the plan and voted against it in the task force. I think, I'm not sure Mike mentioned, VDOT says it requires a 70-foot right-of-way along I-66 and retention of the commuter parking spaces. Some members of the community think the county's plan should not ignore VDOT's concerns, but address them more forthrightly. For myself, I think it's reasonable to try to envisage what we would like to have in an ideal world, but I would like to see the plan be the best we can make it. We want very much that change at East Falls Church enhance and not undermine the character of the area. We're glad to see language in the county's plan stating the goal of supporting and protecting the character of East Falls Church. we hope East Falls Church can become an even more attractive, pleasant, and efficient place to transfer to and from the Metro line, including the new Silver line. But on the critical issues of density and building height on the Metro line, we're disappointed. We feel our views have been ignored, and we're particularly disappointed that the key parameters of East Falls Church development are to be made a bargaining chip in an effort to trade for benefits from real estate developers. The relatively small difference in the number of families that could be housed by overbuilding directly at the station does not, in our view, justify undermining the character of the area. The plan we have now would radically change the skyline of East Falls Church, with the only 9-story tower for miles around. Proposed for the north side of the site, 9 stories would keep much of the site in shadow from fall until spring. The plan would drop, how many? 350 families onto a 5.7-acre island, surrounded on 3 sides by low-density single-family homes. The elimination of all commuter parking would fill the surrounding neighborhoods with parked cars evenings and weekends when parking restrictions are not in effect. We call on the county board to moderate the proposed scale of development. Failing that, we hope civic leaders like you will exercise your influence to shape an outcome that fairly balances the interests of the community at large with those of the Arlingtonians most directly affected. Thank you.
I just want to give a little background about how I got involved at the end of this process, and I wish that I had known there was going to be a PowerPoint. I would have brought the 3 recommendations that are in the current plan that the board will be looking at this weekend regarding housing in particular, but I'll review them with you. And perhaps many of you have read the plan, so that would be great too. I'll just start out by saying right from the start, the perspective of the Housing Commission is that the task force process did not include an adequate discussion of housing or affordable housing in particular. The Housing Commission had a representative at most of the meetings, and she reported back that over those 2 years that she was part of the group, they did not discuss housing. That was brought up several times and not discussed. So any sector plan needs to include housing and affordable housing, and that may involve further educating a community that's going through this process about the importance and the essential component that housing is in any planning process. Late last spring, the task force and the county staff came before the Housing Commission with the task force plan. In the plan, it had only the boilerplate language about Arlington's affordable housing ordinance and nothing specific for East Falls Church. They were open to our input, but the fact that it had not been incorporated into the conversations at that point, we found problematic. The plan was then accepted by the county board, meaning that they received the plan in its general concepts or framework, but they asked for further work on the details, among which was affordable housing. The county board put forth its policy directives, and the staff went to work on a research and analysis report that came out last fall. In the winter, the Planning Commission's LRPC, which is a long-range planning committee, was meeting to review and comment on the results of that research and analysis paper alongside the county's draft plan. At that point, I was asked to be the housing liaison to the East Falls Church process that the LRPC was going through because that representative who had been on the task force earlier had left the Housing Commission by that point. So the county board adopted some policy determinations in July when it accepted the plan in its framework. And those determinations were to guide the finalization of the East Falls Church plan. The board's policy framework requested that the plan, and I'm just going to quote a little bit, said to ensure that with new development, the needs of low to moderate income families are met through a variety of measures, including the provision of on-site affordable units and a mix of housing options. And then the directives that came out of that framework directed staff to outline goals and strategies for preserving and creating affordable housing within 1 mile of the East Falls Church Station area. So after the review the research and analysis, and then the new plan came through, which was put out for the RTA was put out in March. It included 3 components for housing. So their recommendations, number 8, number 9, and number 10, if you have read it or want to go and look. And as I said before, when we received it in May, none of these existed. So that's an advance from almost nothing to what we have today. At this point, number 8 reads, achieve a minimum of 30 to 45, as Michael had told us earlier, a minimum of 30 to 45 units of on-site affordable housing on the Park and Ride site by making it a requirement of any joint development proposal on this public property. So it gave a specific number, which was not there before. And the 30 to 45 comes from 450,000 square feet at the low end of a development, or up to 45 if it reaches the 9 stories, which would be the 600,000 square feet. So that's the range that might happen. The only location where there is any goal or expectation of a significant number of affordable units is on this WMATA Park and Ride site. As the plan stands now, no other sites will have enough density to support more than a handful of additional units. The 30 to 45 figure envisioned for the WMATA site would have been even less if calculated solely on the affordable housing ordinance that Arlington has. But since it is labeled publicly owned land in the GLUP, county staff went with a higher calculation. As I said, the previous draft had no specific number, so this is an improvement. The I guess criticism that the commission would bring forth on that is that it would seem that if it's public land, the county could certainly propose that more than 7 to 10% of the new units on that site would be affordable, which is what that 30 to 45 would represent. So that's number 8, the more specific of the 3. Then we have 9 and 10. 9 states, work with the county's affordable housing developer partners to identify a site within the planning area to develop a new affordable housing project using a variety of tools. So again, we were pleased that this was in there because it wasn't in there prior, and it's good to state that outright in the plan. However, we looked at it as almost gratuitous because it doesn't go beyond what the county and affordable housing developers are doing all the time all over the county. So it's nothing specific to East Falls Church, and it doesn't bring about anything that wouldn't normally evolve on its own. So number 10, the third and final housing-related recommendation reads, work with owners of market affordable units in the greater East Falls Church vicinity to develop a long-term affordability plan, which could include the use of the low-income housing tax credits or the AHIF, the Affordable Housing Investment Fund, for funding, among other resources, to rehabilitate the units and preserve affordability. So it's talking about 2 things, market affordable units, so those are called MARCs. They're already affordable at market rate now, so they have no county subsidy, and they exist now. So it's looking at a pool of units that are in the greater area, which is the other aspect of this. Greater area means like within 1 mile. So that's going to include like the Patrick Henry apartments that are up at the top of Wilson and McKinley Road. It's also going to go as far as Westover to include Westover apartments and many other small affordable units that are peppered there near the little hamlet of Westover. And then basically nothing coming back to the metro itself except for a small 12-unit complex, which is situated just behind the BB&T at Lee and Washington Boulevard, just before you'd enter 66 West. So again, we're happy that this is in there, but it's not what the county wouldn't already be doing, attempting to assist any current owner or assist an affordable housing developer to purchase from a current owner to preserve any units that already exist. So already what the county is doing and nothing specific to East Falls Church. So those are the 3 components. And then just commentary of, having been part of this process and also from the Housing Commission, I just wanted to make a few remarks. So one of the major barriers that we observed in the plan is that the plan itself covers a very small and specific study area within less than a mile of the metro itself. It identifies most, if not all, developable sites, the ones that Michael went over, 1 through 12, on the map, and it sets a cap for height and density on each of those sites. So in one respect, this is good, to vision the area and have input for future development. But the downside, of course, is that the height and density chosen is the most limited and therefore will not generate opportunities for affordable housing. the developments or redevelopments of those sites will not be substantial enough to subsidize some units renting at affordable levels. In other words, they picked them and said 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 9. So most of those are quite low, and they cannot support affordable units within any redevelopment that would occur. Due to the limited nature of the study area and the limited discussion on housing, the plan does not contain the level of density needed, as I said, for the affordable housing contributions to make sense to any developer. They're not going to do it if it's not viable financially for them. So if it is approved as it is, then significant density potential is lost, and a huge opportunity is wasted for smart growth development in general and affordable housing in particular. It will be a missed opportunity in one of the last sectors of Arlington to be envisioned and redeveloped at this scale. There does seem to be some significant resistance from some of the neighbors to the idea of height and density, and understandably, since it has been a relatively quiet and sleepy area until now, and I can speak to that myself. But as we can see, the City of Falls Church is already taking advantage of the opportunities coming to the East Falls Church area, and Arlington also has large structures on the other side of 66 at Lee Highway. Arlington seems to be sacrificing, at a minimum, more density on Washington Boulevard at Lee Highway, and Lee Highway moving towards 66. Today, it may be hard to envision that, but we will see additional 6- and 8-story buildings on the Falls Church side in the coming years, and the Silver Line within the next 2 years. So significant change is coming, whether we like it or want it or not. This plan is the community's chance to shape that change rather than have it happen to the neighborhood through fickle market forces. As it stands now, I would characterize the plan as unambitious or even timid in the face of the changes that are inevitably coming to the East Falls Church neighborhood. Rather than being a bold, imaginative, and taking full advantage of this unusual opportunity with the Silver Line, the plan seems to harken back a bit to the 1940s. And that's unfortunate, to not take advantage of the opportunities that stand before us. While the plan will achieve a minimum of 30 to 45 units, that basically encompasses all of the affordable housing for the immediate metro area. As I said, any additional units would be very few, and would be negotiated on a unit-by-unit basis in any given project. So there are no guarantees about how many additional units, possibly up to 10 in the entire remainder of the planning area, if the plan moves forward as it stands today. So, in spite of the plan that, in spite of the survey that Michael showed you earlier, the Civic Association itself, 54% of the respondents wanted to see more affordable housing on that site. And over half of those wanted to see between 10 and 20% of any new units be affordable. So the Housing Commission views this as a missed opportunity to explore and employ creative tools in a discussion of affordable housing that could have resulted in a vision for a more diverse, mixed development community located at a brand new transfer point of the metro in Arlington. So one of the lessons learned is that the issue of housing needs to be a primary conversation during all planning processes. There should be a real effort to formulate specific goals early on in relation to housing for an area and affordable housing in particular, using Arlington's own goals and targets as a guide. And I just read a couple of quick excerpts from the letter that will be going forth from the Housing Commission to the County Board, accompanying the staff report this weekend. It says, it will state that the contribution of on-site committed affordable units in East Falls Church would further the county's affordable housing goals, in particular those related to the creation of 400 new CAFs, which are committed affordable units, per year. It would also ensure that available affordable housing is safe and decent, and would serve to distribute affordable housing within neighborhoods and throughout the county. So given that the plan includes GLUP changes, in other words, the 3, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9 numbers that we saw before, the commission letter will read that that it hopes that the county board will consider the following, and there are 3 points that we are putting forth. The first is the addition of an element of flexibility with regard to density so that as development moves forward in the area, the option for additional height and density will exist. The second asks them to consider in the plan a numerical goal for new and preserved affordable units in the East Falls Church area, which stipulate the targeted AMI, which is area median income levels of those units. So asking for a percentage, and then within the percentage, what level of affordability will those units carry? And finally, that specific housing goals be formulated as a part of future planning processes with an emphasis on the preservation of marks, which are the market rate affordables, and the stipulation of specific numerical and AMI, area median income targets, where the creation of new housing is likely. So I just want to close with a quote from one of the county board members, which I heard at the March conversation that the board had advertising this plan. And it's quoted, "And whether we like it or not, development will come to East Falls Church. It will either come and be forced on the neighborhood, one building at a time, or we can adopt a plan to envision the future and plan a new neighborhood center that is a great place to live, to visit, to play, and to do business." And I would add, out of the quote, and to do all those things, live, visit, play, and do business with our neighbors at all income levels. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kathy Brooks, and I was wondering if there were going to be any street widenings on Sycamore and Washington Boulevard up to the entrance to 66, because I've been in the line on Sycamore through 4 lights or more in the morning because it stalls because all the people in Lee Highway are turning to get on 66 and they can't get across the intersection. So what will the greater density do, and where are you going to put their cars?
The plan calls for 2 lanes instead of the 1 lane onto I-66 West, and also that instead of having a dedicated left turn lane that would go across the bridge there, that would be a straight through or left turn lane. So you would have 2 lanes all the way from Lee Highway all the way to the entrance of 66 to improve that intersection. And there are intersection improvements to make that turning movement move smoother.
Let me count.
And what about parking for the new units you're building? And that's going to increase traffic.
The buildings that we're talking about are very modest, and in terms of the amount of parking underneath the buildings, and that's what I suggested with the Exxon Mobil site, is that the parking generation, and I forget the numbers right now, is enormous about the Exxon Mobil site, and by putting a 5 to 6 story building there, the traffic impact of that is negligible. So it's a net gain in terms of the traffic. So I think from the standpoint of the types, and that's what Alice's point was, is that the density is just so low that we're proposing that it will not have an impact on the traffic itself. And that was the traffic study's conclusion, was that when you look at these things, there's a certain variance that always happens, and we're within that variance. And so it will not have a deleterious impact. Now, you're right. There are a lot of people that come through there already, and that is not going to be solved by this proposal. On the other hand, I think that there will be changes in terms of the commuting patterns when the opening of the Silver Line occurs. And so that I think will make a difference. When people coming from the Bailey's Crossroads area, they will access the system at a different point because of the Silver Line.
Let me, if I could, just comment. The plan is.
You get a little closer, I think.
Can you hear? Am I on it now?
Yeah, yes.
The plan is frankly automobile unfriendly. I'm not a big automobile guy, and I'm sympathetic to the idea of getting people out of their cars, and this plan is sympathetic to the idea of getting people out of their cars. So If you like that idea, you'll like this plan. You don't park at the station anymore. You have to get there by some other way. Your traffic is not improved through the neighborhood. It's going to be less, it's going to be more constricted because of more activities along Washington Boulevard, more activities along Sycamore Street. In fact, one of the proposals is to narrow Sycamore Street in certain respects, which I find just strange. But you either are sympathetic to the idea that yes, we're going to push automobiles further out of our lives, and I'm sympathetic to that idea, but I don't see East Falls Church as a good place to try to implement that strategy in the limited area which we're trying to treat with this plan, because there's a vast area of streets and houses and suburbia which will be is not going to change.
Charlie?
Yes, I'm Charlie Clark. I'm wondering about the planning for resistance from VDOT. The county and enthusiasts must have a strategy for that. And secondly, what about the resistance from the merchants? The owners of the Exxon Mobil, for example, have a prime location, and would they be overridden by eminent domain or what?
On the Exxon Mobil site, if it continues to make money, they'll continue to be an Exxon Mobil site there. So in terms of the merchants, and I guess what was the other part of your question, Charlie? Oh, VDOT. Yes, the VDOT. I'm sure if we came forward with an 18-story proposal, VDOT would say, "Hey, that's great, because now I've got 60% of that money in my pocket." What we tried to do was to craft what we thought would be the lowest possible plan to entice VDOT and Metro to accept this, because we were concerned about the height and density that Alan mentioned. I mean, that was not a goal of ours, is to build high. It was actually to try to get buy-in by VDOT and Metro, and they may eventually do that. That's my hope. Certainly, with the price of gasoline going up, things may change in terms of VDOT's view of keeping the commuter parking spaces. So I think the jury is still out on that, and the dialogue is ongoing between Arlington County staff and VDOT.
Can I just add, it is a visioning document, and some of the testimony that came out last month, individuals who came before the board when this was advertised, it was expressed like, why is the county doing this to me? Why are they planning this building in my neighborhood? And, things like that. And I think there's just a misunderstanding in the community that this is just these are renderings. This is not what the building's gonna look like. These are ideas, these are concepts responding to what the community itself requested, right? A plaza to meet and greet with other people, low amounts of retail, lots of infrastructure improvements, sidewalk widening, trees, pedestrian safety, biking, improvements, tons of things that we are going to get in our neighborhood as a result of this. But we have to give a little too. We have to make this lot, the Metro lot, feasible, financially, that someone would be willing to purchase it from VDOT. And VDOT needs a certain amount of money that they would, sell it for. So that has to happen. And so we can't have it all. We have to make the compromises and envision what we want and hope that individual landowners will at some point sell their property. And if they do, the buyer will have to go by the plan that we have, whatever height was mentioned there or usage was mentioned there. So slowly this will roll out if VDOT ever sells and these other pieces begin to go, and as Falls Church develops and we see what 8 and 10 stories against interstate highway really looks like, not that scary, those things happen, then ours might start getting going. But this is a 20-year plan. It's not going to happen next year, and no one's going to have their property taken away from them. It's going to be an organic, natural process. And what the county is doing in partnership with the neighborhood is trying to get a handle on this so that we don't look like Houston, Texas in the miniature when this all unfolds, that we have some control and some vision about how it comes about and what are the things as a community that we value that we want in this plan. And beyond infrastructure, some people want housing and some people want biking, safety, and some people want another metro entrance and all the different needs. So it's the push and pull that has resulted in this visioning document, which is just a vision. right?
Can I have a clarifying question on that? So will, at the end of the day, if the county adopts this, does this then provide the by right, outer edge of by right for what the developers can do on those sites?
It'll change. They're going to revise the GLUP.
Right.
The GLUP.
Explain what that is.
Let me talk about the GLUP a minute.
Tell them what that is.
The GLUP is the General Land Use Plan.
GLUP is the general land use plan.
The
And
GLUP is the General Land Use Plan. The plan would ultimately, the plan which the county board is considering involves GLUP changes. It has to change. One of the reasons it has to change is because East Falls Church has the language in the GLUP. The station area will remain a low-density residential area with redevelopment limited to the existing commercial and industrial area between I-66 and the city of Falls Church boundary. Building heights in this area are limited to 65 feet along major street frontages, tapering to 35 feet adjacent to residential areas. That's the way the GLUP reads now. This GLUP has to be revised with this plan. So that's my understanding.
No, and I would say that that's right. And the GLUP was that was put in 1986, and you know, that, a lot has changed since 1986.
I have a question up here from Val.
I confess I haven't been following this too much, but the Silver Line, which is going through the area, where is it starting? Where is it ending? Is it following the Orange Line tracks? And also, what will it do for metro capacity in the area in rush hour and the rest of the time?
So the Silver Line will start in the district and go and follow the tracks of the Orange Line until it gets to East Falls Church, and then it will branch out and follow the right-of-way of Route 267, and then the first stop is going to be there's going to be 4 stops in Tysons, and then Reston and Wheelie Avenue. I think that's the terminus point at this point. The eventual goal is to take that all the way to Dulles. But that's phase 2, and that won't come in until 2016, maybe 2017. It will increase the amount of capacity. There will be more trains coming on the Orange Line. And one of the things that Metro is looking at is moving the Blue Line trains, more Blue Line trains going over the bridge where the Yellow Line goes now, so that the Silver Line trains then will follow that route into the city.
Instead of using a percentage, instead of the county was making the claim that they had to use the 1 mile radius to include sites like the Westover Apartments to guarantee that they would stay as affordable housing. Wasn't there some agreement with Westover as part of the conversion that the county or someone gave them money and that would hold that in place? So I didn't quite understand how that would hold water, that having them in this study plan would guarantee something that was already guaranteed.
Okay. The first point is a clarification about what happened at the Housing Commission last week, which was that this plan was presented and the commission voted on it as it stands with the 3 recommendations that I reviewed with you, and the motion failed. So 4 people were in favor of the plan and 5 of us opposed, and then so we had to have a passing measure. So we went through the discussion again, and with the 3 points that I listed during my presentation before about flexibility in the density, the inclusion of some percentages, and then noting that the housing needs to be an integral component of any planning process moving forward in our county. Once those 3 were included, we voted again, and 6 of us, myself included, voted for it, and 3 opposed. So that's what happened on last Thursday. And the reason that we wanted to put some sort of percentages in, and we didn't want to presume that we knew what those percentages were, well, that's staff job. But the point of that was to get beyond the 30 to 45 units, which are in the plan now. But remember that those are only on the park and ride site. So there's no mention of any requirement for anything affordable anywhere else but on one lot. So that's, with the 12 existing marks. Okay.
Well, yeah, they're at the BB&T site, they'll be consolidated with the existing 12-unit multifamily structure next to it, and there would be 12 affordable housing units would be preserved at that site. But I also would like to interject is that a lot of discussion on affordable housing is usually when you have a situation where you already have affordable housing on a site and a building is coming in to develop it and you're trying to preserve some of it. I just wanted to point out that those units that we're talking about here, that's in lieu of a parking lot. They're not affordable housing units right there now. This is actually creating new affordable housing units on the parking lot site.
Right, and because it's a publicly owned site, that was the concept, is that we already, not we, but it is controlled not by a private developer right now. So before it is, we can put some stipulations on that. And Arlington as a community has held affordable housing as a very important value. And so when these opportunities come in, we want to get that language in there, and now is the time. So that's true. And the only other units that are mentioned are these other 12 that do exist now behind BB&T that I mentioned earlier. And so there was concern with the LRPC conversations that we had that those could get lost in some sort of consolidation and redevelopment of that site at Washington Boulevard and Lee Highway. And so it is in the plan that those need to be preserved. So that's 12 that exist, which will remain, and the 30 to 45 that we're hoping to add to our stock of affordable units. Now I forgot the rest of your other question.
Westover.
Oh, Westover, thank you. So Westover, I don't know the answer to your question either, actually. I mean, I think that because there are so few marks, these market rate affordables, the only ones that were identified really are the 12 that have now been mentioned for preservation in the plan. There might be 2 or 3 others. I mean, very, very few. And so to get to any marks, to even be able to mention those in the plan, they had to broaden the conversation. Number 10 is a much bigger circle of the 1 mile radius. And they mentioned 2 complexes which are already subsidized through probably federal and county. I'm not totally clear on their funding sources, but they definitely got AHIP and other things. That's Patrick Henry up at the top of the hill and Westover in Westover. So that's AHC owns that one, and Mark Silverwood owns the other. So they're already in partnership with the county. They already have restrictions. So that's why I called it gratuitous, because they're already in our stock. They've already been subsidized. So that's not adding anything to what folks need, working people and below. So it's an excellent question, and I share the question.
I'll take one last question, and then I think we actually are getting to the end of our time. We'll come to the front of the room. John, I think this John will get it. It's a little John Bottom. Thank you, Joan.
I'm Joan McDermott. I'm wondering, I know this is getting ahead in the planning, but what size affordable units would you like to see on that site? Let's say you get to have 30 to the 45 units. What size? Families? 3 bedrooms? 2? What would you like?
I mean, the finances would play into that, so it's always a matter of what can be afforded, but Arlington really needs family-sized units right now. Folks who cannot pay these $2,000 a month rents for two-bedroom apartments. Those are the folks who are really, really in need right now, and I think there's also a need for efficiencies, actually. So we have kind of like at the extremes right now. So when this ever moves forward, which is going to be years and years down the line, they'll do a market study and figure out, and hopefully we'll have, a rent study from the county and figure out what the needs are at that time. But at this moment, I'd say those are the 2, but who knows, in 5 to 10, it could be different.
I want to ask you to give great thanks to Arlington Independent Media, our support people who provide our services for taping.